So, race is a fiction, and in other words, it is a lie. So, our opening lines question for you today is, what is a lie that you once thought was true? And feel free to type those responses into the chat. We're going to play music for a couple of minutes, and I'm really excited to hear what you all come up with. So, all right, let's go on to the next slide so I can introduce our incredible teaching artist for the day, Uju Asika, who is a multi-award nominated blogger, screenwriter, and creative consultant. And she is also the author, as you probably know, of Bringing Up Race, How to Raise a Kind Child in a Prejudiced World, published by Yellow Kite in September 2020 and by Sourcebooks USA in May 2021. She has an incredibly impressive resume and is the founder of the Top 10 UK Mum blog and Top 10 London lifestyle blog, Babes About Town, is a former screenwriter and script editor for some of Africa's top TV dramas. And I could go on, but I would much rather, and I think that you would all much rather, hear it straight from Uju herself. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our incredible teaching artist, Uju Asika.
Hello, everyone. Can you see me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I'm so pleased. I'm just so thrilled to be here. And yeah, thanks for the introduction. It's funny because I'm on holiday. I'm like this big family vacation for my aunt's 60th birthday. And one of my cousins was like, oh, it's so strange because you're like this author, you're like this published author, but you're still the same really silly person. And that's kind of how I think of myself. So it's always weird hearing people reading out my resume, but yes, I am an author, blogger. I'm a mother of two incredibly funny and unique boys who are 13 and 16. I live in London and I'm so thrilled to be outside of London currently in Punta Cana for a few days. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, and I'm delighted to be here.
Right. Thank you so much for that little introduction. I'm super jealous. It's actually it's not too bad out. But I definitely am not in the Dominican Republic and wish that I was. But yeah, I think now if you just want to talk a little bit about your book, the process behind it, the inspiration, and yeah, really anything that you want us to know about your incredible best-selling book, I think that we'd all really appreciate that.
Yeah, so this is the book, Bringing Up Race, How to Raise a Kind Child in a Prejudiced World. And this is a book that I always say to people that I really did not want to write. It was kind of thrust on me by one of my relatives who heard me, she always heard my stories, experiences I'd had with my kids. And one of the most prominent experiences was when when my boys, when they were like 9 and 13, no, 9 and 12, they would have been. And there was a footballer, so in England, sorry, soccer player, as you would say. So a soccer player called Aubameyang, who was playing in a match. We support Arsenal, and he was playing for Arsenal, and he had scored in a match, and then a fan in the audience threw a banana at him. And so my boys were like, what does that mean? Like, why are they throwing a banana at him? And in that moment, I had two feelings. One of them was, I'm so glad that my boys have got to the ages of 9 and 12 and haven't had to consider what it means when somebody throws a banana at a Black man. And the other thought was, here we go again. I have to explain racism to my children, and I had to explain to them, the long history of people comparing Black people to monkeys. And, it's always a painful moment as a parent, no matter what. Like even now, I've written the book on race, and we still have to have these conversations. And it's always going to be a painful moment because that's just what racism is. But at the same time, I I tell them the truth, and then I try and fill them with a sense of, that there's more that they can do, and that there's more to them than the racism that comes, that comes their way or that comes our way. So that was one of the inspirations for writing Bringing Up Race. And even then, I still did not want to write this book. I did not want to be, that Black woman talking about race. I didn't want to, I felt like as a writer, I thought, am I going to be pigeonholed? I've been blogging for now, it's coming up on 12 years. And when I started my blog, I was very specific about not starting my blog as a Black woman blogging. I was just someone blogging. And at the same time, I centered myself and I centered my kids. Actually, my kids were the main attraction of the blog, because they just sort of, in the blog, and I was taking them up and down London, things to do, where to go. And, the main thing for me was showing that two Black boys and a Black family in London can do absolutely everything that a so-called regular Londoner would do, or what people, in the movies that we watch and the TV shows that you see, very often the vision of London does not really include a family that looks like ours. So that was important to me. But I didn't make a thing about race. And so I didn't want to write this book. But then, the more I thought about it, and the more I thought about my experiences that I'd had growing up in Britain, I felt like I had to write. I felt like I had to give the little girl that I was a voice, and also give voice to other people, children and families who are experiencing racism, not just in London, but across the world. So yeah, that's kind of my background.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that is just like, I think so important. And I think just thank you also for telling a story that is so crucial and so, as you said, left out of traditional narratives, that is also accessible and for people who are raising a younger generation. So yeah, thank you for that insight. And I think we're all really excited to hear some of the book. So now we're going to turn to sort of the excerpt portion and have you read a little bit from your book.
Absolutely. So this is from the introduction. Yeah, I'll just read a couple of pages. A little girl sat on a playing field, her bottom damp with early morning dew. Behind her, a tall stone building, the entrance to one of England's top boarding schools. Beyond her, more grass and trees and farmland as far as the eye could see. It struck her that no matter how long she walked, she would be the only Black girl for miles. The little girl hugged her knees to her chest. She had never felt so far away from home. Then a voice inside her whispered, "That's okay. You will never be one of the crowd, and that makes you special. You can choose who you want to be. That means you're free." Growing up Black. Growing up between Britain and Nigeria in the 80s, I had a shifting sense of identity. Nowadays, there's a term for it, third culture kid. It was disorienting at times, but also liberating. I realized early on that I didn't have to be one thing or the other. Straddling two cultures added a depth and richness to my life and an openness to new experiences. My early encounters with racism were minor compared to what my older sister went through. As the first Black girl at our boarding school, she was once tied to a chair by fellow pupils, hurling racial insults at her. She was 6 years old. By the time I joined the school, I was one of at least 4 other Black kids, including my 2 older siblings. Still, my difference marked me out for jokes like, smile, otherwise we can't see you, after the lights went out. Sometimes I wonder if my overly smiley personality came as a response to comments like these. Toothy grin, lips stretched wide, just wishing to be seen. Actually, I've always been a happy-go-lucky kind of girl. Old photographs and scratchy video footage from early childhood reveal my giggly nature, or what my sister fondly calls me to this day, a laughing jackass. My memories of growing up are overwhelmingly happy ones. Ours was a tight-knit school where I made many friends. We'd roll down hills, climb swing ropes, play stuck in the mud, and whisper secrets in the dark. I had my first long-term romance with an English boy. We dated for 2 years between the ages of 9 and 11. Holidays in Nigeria meant endless cousins for sleepovers, afternoons spent devouring the contents of my parents' bookshelves, playing cowboys outside, climbing trees for fruit, or watching The Sound of Music on repeat. Yet, I also remember the helplessness of walking down a London street and someone shouting, "nigger," from a car window, being called a blot on the landscape by a girl who would later call me her best friend, a toddler reaching out and trying to rub the brown off my skin, cracks about Africa and monkeys and mud huts. I remember my best friend at age 9 pulling me in for a tight embrace and then looking at me with sorrow or pity in her eyes. "I wish you were white," she said before running off. I can still feel the visceral shock of having the word nigger spat at me by a boy in my class. I didn't know what I'd done, if anything at all, to offend or provoke him. Several friends leapt to my defense, but I had no words, and that was part of my shame. Words were my allies, my armor, but they had let me down. I smiled and I carried on. I could imagine a future, though, when things would be different. I wanted my kids to grow up in a world where nobody could make them feel less than they were just because of the tone of their skin or the tightness of their curls. I wanted a life in which insults like nigger would never have the power to leave me speechless. I had it all planned out. I would be worldly, wealthy, and magnanimous. I'd adopt a rainbow tribe of babies from every corner of the planet, like Josephine Baker or Angelina Jolie, as it happened. Of course, by that time, grand-scale poverty, disease, and famine, nuclear disarmament, and peace in the Middle East would be sorted out too. Yes, I too had a dream.
I have like full body chills. Wow. Like, thank you so much for reading that. I like definitely need to buy a copy of your book now, which will have a place for where you can do so. But I think like one thing in particular really multiple things stood out, but I think like your authentic voice throughout that entire piece, like I was able as a listener to just like relate to you and your experiences. And I just like love what you said about like straddling two cultures gave a depth and a richness to my life. Because I think so often when we think about race or when we think about Blackness in the context of white supremacy, we often think of like emptiness or being like devoid of something. And so I like your detail about like the struggle, but also like the richness and the beauty that comes from that. So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, now we're going to get into the writing exercise portion of this evening. So I will turn it back over to you, Uju, just to sort of read the prompts. And yeah, we'll play some music after.
Awesome. Yes. So write about the last time you felt like a fish out of water. How do you find your feet on foreign ground?
Let's get on into our second exercise. That share screen, we always forget to show. Bonnie's shaking her head every time. It's okay. We're gonna get it on the next one. But yeah, all right, I'll turn it back over to you, Uju, just to read the prompt. And again, we'll write for about 5 minutes.
You wake up in somebody else's skin. Write about your day. Write a note to yourself from a future in which racism is a thing of the past.
Thank you all so, so much for joining. Thank you so much, Uju. And if everyone could please join me in unmuting yourselves and giving Uju a big round of applause. Yay! Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing a bit about your work and your journey. Thank you to all the participants who showed up on this Friday night and shared their works with us. As always, follow us on social at Girls Right Now. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Friday evening and a great weekend, and we'll see you at the next one.